Welcome back. Today we are talking with our Mark Armour and Ken Simpson. Let's talk about thinking beyond the plan. Ken, you had a interesting comment to think beyond the plan and the desire to exercise the plan. Now, who wants to go first? Because I know you both have comments about this one.
Might be an opportunity for me to get one of those controversial comments in.
Go for it.
Yeah, we've thrown BIA at you twice and you didn't jump.
I know I didn't take the bait. I think enough people know my stance. I don't necessarily have to reiterate it. But I do want to talk about exercising, and I want to talk about plans. What Ken said is really eye opening, and it's the crux of some of the things that I have started saying, which is too often, because we're so plan focused, then when we go into exercising and testing, the objective is to identify and close gaps within the plan. I believe that good testing and exercising should be an opportunity for us to get comfortable and practiced in working in the presence of gaps. Too often we think, oh, okay, we'll address that so we don't have to worry about it. But really, in the real world, if that scenario had occurred, you haven't yet addressed that gap. And that's where that's the world that we need to occupy. But when we talk about moving beyond the plan, this is where I genuinely believe. I think if we're going to evolve as a discipline, we need to jettison plans entirely. I think too often plans are a crutch. I think too often we establish this expectation that plans are going to provide answers and procedures that everybody can follow that will be applicable in response to any event that occurs. And I know that people are trying to move towards smaller, lighter, one-page plans. I still think that's the wrong way to go. I still think if we want people to develop capabilities, if we want people to develop competencies, if we want people to be able to practice their relationship building and their skill building and exercise and practice the ability to work in the presence of gaps and issues and all of the messy complexity that losses and disruptions and disasters bring, then we need to stop setting the expectation that people can rely on this piece of paper or this material when the time comes, and instead realize they need to rely on themselves and their own competence, as well as realize that the true capability that exists is in all of the individuals within the organization, the different expertise and the different levels of experience and the diverse perspectives that people bring when those issues and those disruptions occur. And again, a lot of this is evident in the research that exists within the resilience domain.
Ken?
Well, Alex, I didn't know we were going to be here for day one of the plan goes the same way as the BIA. I feel honoured. Look, for some time, and I think the idea of what a plan constitutes and whether it's a rigorous set of things you need to follow is part of that divergent path from the traditional business continuity, here's a plan, follow it, to some kind of concept of resilience. And if I took it off to a slightly different path that sort of said way back when, and there's some work that was done by a guy called Aaron Wildevsky that said that the opposite of resilience in his model was anticipation. So if you think about it, if we can anticipate something, we can plan for it. And if we can plan for it, then following the plan of what we anticipated occurring seems like a perfectly sensible idea. And a lot of what we do and have done for many years in business continuity is about anticipating the thing and planning for it. Now, I really think the challenge of being resilient is that stuff you can't anticipate happens to you. Like, we all had these plans for pandemic. I'm pretty certain, because I was there when we were doing it. It isn't sort of like what's happening now. So we need to be able to adapt and respond to what's going on, and not say we anticipated this and we have a plan. And so when I talked about moving beyond the plan, part of it was sort of saying, well, great, your team can respond when you've got a plan. Now let's see how good they are when you don't. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're going to get thrown in most of these things today. Mark talked before about complex, organizations as complex adaptive systems. So that's the reality of the world we're facing. A ship turns sideways in the Suez Canal and global supply chains get backlogged all over the world. We don't anticipate that kind of stuff. Now, how are we going to react to it? How are you going to deal with that? I think that's the difference between traditional business continuity planning and testing the plan versus exercising the people into how to respond and to have a real capability.
I think some people tend to interpret the plan as being, the business continuity plan as being scenario-based and focus on a couple of key items. And I think what sometimes needs to happen is that the plan incorporates your overall strategy as well. You have a plan. We have a crisis management team that will be activated. We will have this in place. We will have that in place. We have, these other tactics in place. That's the whole plan, not just, a 500-page document or a 1-page document that says thou shalt do A, B, and C, and here's how you do it. I think some people see a plan as one singular item, while others interpret plan as the entire encompassing program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people get those two mixed up, and that causes additional confusion.
It can.
Yeah.
I think we have to realize that the language we use in business continuity drives people's perception of what we do. And I dare you to do a Google search of business continuity and pick any article at random and see if you don't see the word plan or planning occur multiple times. Every single piece of information you find in the business continuity world will revolve around plans and planning. And if we really want to evolve, again, my genuine belief is when we look at what contributes to improve resilience within organizations, when we look at the attributes that organizations as complex adaptive systems can rely on to enable them to withstand disruptions and losses, the existence of a plan either is not a factor or it's at the very bottom of the list, right? Really what the factors are things like capacity. Again, it's relationships, it's decentralized decision-making, it's diversity, it's collaboration. All of these things are really what contribute to resilience. And by continually using this term plan, we set this expectation that that's what we are about, and that's how resilience or business continuity is made. As long as we have a plan, we're good to go. And I understand there's a lot of people in the resilience and business continuity discipline who understand that, but I don't think they realize just how much a volume of promotional materials out there are giving a different perception of what we do. And we have to now counter that perception that it's all about having a plan and testing that plan and working that plan and using that plan.
And I think sometimes the perception of the plan is that it's response focused. And if we're moving to resilience, then we're moving before the incident. We're trying to build preparedness, of which you've said many times, Mark. Build up the preparedness levels and capabilities of people and processes, et cetera, et cetera. But when people think of the plan, it's we've got it, now it'll sit on a shelf, and until something happens, then we don't have to give it a second thought. We'll pull it out and look at it when an event occurs. It's kind of, instead of focusing ourselves now after an event, we're trying to refocus before an event, to put it in simple terms.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we need to get that preparedness appropriately aligned. So again, we've thrown around this complex adaptive stuff a couple of times, and people who've read my stuff will know that a lot of the times when I'm talking about complexity, I'll sort of refer to Dave Snowden and his work with the Cynefin framework, and in some of his work thinking about how complexity and resilience sort of come together. And I think Mark made some references to it earlier. Dave talks about the need for distributed decision making, but maintaining centralized coordination. Now, if you think about how traditionally we proposed crisis management and business continuity response structures, we turned that on its head. We kept centralized decision making and distributed coordination, and maybe that's actually not even the right way to go about it. And he's talking about the nature of resilience, or in these kind of complex, chaotic situations, is all about early detection of the problem, which again shifts from we just wait for an alarm to go off and we respond, but to be picking up weak signals and that kind of stuff. Fast recovery, yep, that might, if it's an anticipatable thing, might involve plans, but then being in a position to very quickly exploit any opportunity that's presented, and how we achieve those kind of things, how we distribute decision making and centralized coordination changes the way we create trust and relationships within organizations. So again, a lot of it changes things from here is a procedure. And look, again, we go back to look at where this came from. You have to have a plan, because business continuity was disaster recovery, which is IT, and it's about recovering servers. And you have to have a plan for that, because it just goes bang, 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 bang. People, unfortunately, are nowhere near as cooperative as those bits of tin are in just being brought back in line in a standardized SOP. So, yeah.
Even those bits of tin aren't as collaborative or as
yeah, sometimes Mark, those bits of tin are a lot more helpful.
Well, how do you go about changing that crisis management structure then? Because I completely 100% agree with the central coordination, but distribute the decision making, because who's better to make a immediate decision? The frontline person who's right there experiencing the situation. They don't have the time to wait for someone in a command center who knows how far away, who don't have all the details. How do you go about doing that? Do you just empower people? But how do you go about doing that? Because in disaster situations, sometimes fear kicks in, and you want to help, but you're too afraid to do something, and you end up with this clash. So how can you go about making that change occur?
If probably two things. One is the basic, which is, you can expressly delegate that authority, and you can make sure that people understand the level of authority that they have and the degree to which they are empowered to make decisions. And we see this in practice in places like Waffle House. I don't know if Ken Simpson's familiar with the US based chain that our federal emergency management agencies use to gauge how bad the disaster is based on whether Waffle House is in operation. But even Walmart and Home Depot do the same thing. Their local store managers have a really high degree of authority to do whatever is necessary to support their communities and their employees and the people in their communities. But then that gets to the other piece, which is the much more difficult part, and that's culture, right? We can delegate authority, but if we don't have a culture where people both feel trusted, right? If they don't feel that they're trusted by their management, they're going to be much less likely to make a very important decision when the time comes, and vice versa. If they don't have trust in their leadership to make the right decisions in their best interest for their safety and their livelihood, again, they might abuse that authority, or again, they might be much less likely to use it when the time comes. So that's the two components that I see. Ken might have some good observations here too.
Okay.
I've not actually, I preface by saying I've not necessarily tried to implement this part of distributed decision making personally. The model that's being talked about here is not going to be something you're going to be able to do following an incident. So this isn't, we just put it there and it happens. yeah, it's changing the way in which you respond to these things. I'll send you the reference, Alex. People might be interested. Snowden co-authored with someone a field guide for managing complexity in times of crisis, which has been issued by the European Commission quite recently. But one of the key parts of it, of how to drive that trust, is to the creation of what he calls crews, which are small groups that are empowered to not just empowered to make the decision, but structured appropriately, got the right set of diversity, and it's also about making things as granular as they can be. So yeah, there's a bunch of thinking being done about how to do it, but the real caveat would be it isn't a set and forget. And it's exactly pretty much what Mark said. It's about changing the culture of how you're going to respond to crises and disruptions as they occur. And it also does recognize the place. Sorry, I'm literally scrolling through it. He's set up a matrix that says if it was imaginable and it was knowable and feasible to happen, then you've probably got one of those plans on a shelf that sort of says, yep, we know how to respond to that. If it was unimaginable and unknowable, then your response is going to be profoundly different, and it's going to start with what the hell just happened to us and work out from there.
I think sometimes when situations occur, and maybe you've seen this in your places as well, that there already exists, help desks and service desks and incident management protocols for, and I'm not crazy about the term, but business as usual incidents that happen all the time. And sometimes people forget those exist when a larger scale situation occurs, and they try to recreate the wheel from there. But I think sometimes a lot of the incident management and processes, to your point, Ken, that you just said, some of this stuff may already be there to address these situations. And I think that's part of the resilience that you both mentioned, is we've got to bring those together, because not necessarily, if there's a fire in the building, people will pick up the phone and call the help desk. Help desk does what they do, and if that's not necessarily activate your business continuity plan every single time, depending on what it is, and I think it is part of breaking down some of these silos and using some of the information that is already there. Right?
Yeah. People are going to react in the way that they've rehearsed and practiced. And then I've never been a fan of reorganize in the face of a crisis. People just simply aren't going to do it. They have their connections. You're going to ring your boss, the person who decides your bonus and pay rises. I don't care what your rules and regulations are about ringing a business continuity manager or someone else. The stuff hits the fan, and you're going to ring the guy who controls your remuneration first, I would suspect.
Yeah. Mark, any comments?
I was recently reminded of something else that I've heard Dave Snowden mention, right? Which is resilience capability is sometimes a consequence of instability, right? These complex adaptive systems that experience kind of a fluctuating environments and attacks on its domain tend to be more resilient, because they've practiced this in small ways over the course of the existence of that system. And I'm reminded, I don't know how much research there is on this, but there are huge organizations that have a ton of capacity and resources they can throw at everything or anything that comes their way. And I think some of those were the ones that were perhaps most challenged during COVID, right? Because they weren't really challenged in these small, meaningful ways throughout the course of the organization, because they always had resources they could throw at it. Whereas you see the small startups and you see the medium-sized organizations that have to continually deal with disruptions and competitors and bigger sized operators in their industry. have to constantly adapt and respond to, again, these disruptive forces on a near continual basis. They're the ones that find themselves in a much better position when issues occur. So the only way, one of the only ways I can think of to build resilience in an organization is to stop thinking of resilience as something that's only in place and only helps us for the big major catastrophes and disasters. And instead think that resilience itself is built in our ability to respond to all of these different disruptions in our environments, whether it's a new emerging competitor, maybe it's a merger and an acquisition, maybe it's an IT loss, maybe it's a power loss. Maybe we have disgruntled employees, maybe it's some unionization efforts. All of these things help us to build a more resilient organization. And I think we need to expand our thinking on that and our scope so that we can then utilize our learning and the tools that we apply to those situations so that we're better prepared when the big catastrophe and the big disaster does eventually occur.
Yeah, I agree with the point. We need to expand this, the thinking on resilience, because like Ken mentioned earlier, ITDRP, that's what a lot of people still think is resilient. If my mainframe or application or server automatically switches over to another one, I'm resilient. No, that's not what it means. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think it is. And I agree, Ken. I just wanted to say something on one of the points you mentioned about reassigning. Someone's going to pick up the phone and call the person they know. When it comes to crisis management teams, I've not been a big fan of creating a team structure that doesn't reflect the organization itself. If there is no logistics team, don't create one full of people that don't normally work with themselves, have no idea. If HR is responsible for travel and things like that, don't create a team for travel, just assign it to HR. The right people are there. That's who you're going to call. They know what to do. And I'm amazed how many people push back on that, creating all these different teams, and you've got 10 different individuals, I'm just saying a number here, that on a normally daily basis don't talk to each other anyway. And if they have an issue, Ken, you said it, they're going to pick up the phone and call their boss. Okay, what should I do? This is it, not the person who's in charge of that logistics team or whatever. And I'm not a fan at all of creating a different team structure that doesn't already exist. I'd rather leverage what's there, because then everybody knows if it's travel, call HR right away. That's going to be their thought. It's not going to be this logistics team or whatever. Well, who's in charge of that, right?
Particularly in a disastrous environment, right, where it's going to be complex or chaotic, people are automatically going to default to what's intuitive or instinctual, right? We can't expect that this new structure is just going to go ahead and be formed just because we developed a framework or a plan 6 months ago and we practiced it. People are in those environments, people are much more likely to then fall back on habit and instinct than they are in their day-to-day basis. So that's another reason why those artificial structures aren't gonna work or even be utilized in response to a disaster or catastrophe.
Right. Ken, do you have any final thoughts?
Look, agreeing with exactly what you're saying, and I think we need to ask ourselves why we do this. Where did it come from? If you ask anyone who's been in the military, do they reorganize on their way into battle? I don't think so. You ask the emergency services, do you reorganize? No, they go and act the way they've been trained and practiced. Look at the school of thinking around high reliability organizations. They talk about the focus on operations and learning from your near misses. These are all things that for some reason we've lost in a lot of our thinking, and we just need to go back and look at how other people are looking at this and say we can learn from that. It goes back to what we've been saying all along. Let's not be fixated on these base commodity skills, and let's look at what the rest of the world is doing.
Well, I knew it was going to be a long show. We've been talking enough for about, I think we would be into our sixth segment now. I know I only took 2 breaks, but maybe I'll cut the show into 2 shows, part 1 and part 2. Otherwise, YouTube might kill me here. But do you have any final thoughts on resilience? Mark, I'll let you go first here. Any final comments?
Nothing I can think of. I mean, the only thing I'll say is my genuine hope is that we don't go down the path that I've seen us going so far, which is just rebranding business continuity as resilience. I think Ken said something at the top of the show around, we need to really kind of be deliberate about how we define resilience and what resilience is and why we are endeavoring to build or improve resilience within our organizations. Only then can we kind of go about it the right way. Beyond that, right, it's simply the skills development. It's thinking about things drastically different than we have been, and not relying on checking boxes or being compliant. Fundamentally, it's about relationships, and it's about culture, and it's about trust within organizations. And we can only build those things if we are modeling it and practicing it ourselves on a day-to-day basis.
To your point about rebranding, there was one of the white papers that came out from a vendor a couple of weeks ago, and I took it and replaced the word resilience with business continuity. Read exactly the same.
I read one, and I wanted to shake my head. It said resilience is just business continuity done right. Talk about rebranding.
Well, does that mean for the last 35 we've been doing it wrong?
Right.
Ken, do you have any final comments?
Look, I'd probably I agree with absolutely what you're saying. There's no question. But let me suggest a different part of it, and I hope Mark isn't going to be offended, but he's not easily offended.
Not yet.
Not yet. No. I've posed this question. I've got a research paper or a white paper in my backlog somewhere that is actually the title of it is Business Continuity Resilient. And part of the reason why I think we'll struggle with being resilient is we rarely have a worthwhile debate of ideas. So, we've made a joke about throwing Mark the BIA curveball for him to hit out of the park, and about the plans going the way. But yeah, look, we should be able to debate these ideas. We throw out all different things that we could do differently. We could think about differently. I'm not entirely certain which hand I have to hold up, but this one here, this is why I use this background. These are a bunch of whole disjointed pieces of information, but we need this one where we connect the dots and make it useful. Knowledge is useful. Information is nice to have. And if we want to make that progression, business continuity to resilience, sure, we could just rebrand it. But if I rebranded those 2 slides, it ain't the same thing. So one part for me would be our ability to have meaningful discourse around ideas, to build on other ideas that come from other disciplines without having to own them and incorporate them in our body of knowledge. That's going to come back to the individual practitioner. It's going to come back to how we think about how we develop people in the industry. And for mine, that would have been a big takeaway from it.
I'm not sure what Ken thought I was going to be offended by in that. That was like the ideal way to end this discussion. I think Ken really kind of summed it up, but also kind of highlighted what I think is a very, very, very important idea within this profession and the wider professions that we touch upon: emergency management, crisis management, and that is the ability to engage in robust debate. We can disagree, and I think we can all be okay with disagreeing. We don't all have to see eye to eye on everything, but we do need to be able to logically argue in favor of what we believe, and then obviously just kind of to logically and objectively evaluate what others' opinions are as well.
Yep. And I think on that note, that's the perfect spot to end today's show. Guys, thank you so much. Mark, Ken, It's been really interesting talking and getting ideas. And if there's anyone has an email that they want to send Mark about plans, send them to me and I'll forward them on.
Yeah, I think it's Ken Simpson at Blackstone.
Mark, Ken, thanks so much for your time and expertise. I really appreciate it. I thought this was really informative. I think you've challenged a lot of people and given a lot of new ideas for practitioners or professionals, whatever term you want to use, to really think about moving forward and where the industry needs to change and think going forward as well. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Always
Thanks,
a pleasure,
Alan.
and I'm humbled to share a screen with Ken Simpson and yourself.
The pleasure is all mine, Mark.
I'm humbled. I'm sharing it too with industry leaders here, so I'm quite humbled. So thank you again, and
Thank
to
you.
everybody listening and watching, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.